Hey there everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Archer Build series. In the previous 6 videos we took a look at all the skills in the class, how they work, how many skill points to put in them, and then what they actually add to the class and how you're going to be using them. This 7th video is going to be bringing all that information together in order to work out how you're going to be creating builds on the class, like when you've actually got a certain number of skill points, what skill points you're going to put into what skill, how you're going to be using those skills together. We're also going to look at certain other things like how the skills work together in order to achieve great damage output, and how they work together in order to achieve great defense. So this video is a very long video. It is a presentation that I'm going to be going through this thing we have in front of us. So the first thing to do is make sure you can read this, because if you can't, switch over to some kind of laptop or bigger screen where you can. I'm going to be going through mainly this. There's going to be some photos and pictures we're going to be looking at later on when we're looking at builds, or like how many skill points we put into things. But ultimately we're going to be going through this. So also I've got a lot of just links in the description. You may want to watch this video in certain sections because it's so long, or just otherwise come back and refer to particular bits. So there's lots of useful links in the description. There's also a link in the description, like with all my other Archer Build series, to this guide, which is one where I go through a lot of the skills and I talk about them. We've got some stuff here at the passives which I'm about to go through, about the passives, and then on the Archer skills bit, I also go through each of the skills and list what they're like at each of the skill points. Because also I went through all the skills in the previous 6 videos, I'm not going to be explaining how they work or anything like that, because we've covered that already. So going into this video, actually a little bit to say first. I'm sorry that this video is a little bit late. If you're watching it at the time it comes out, I planned to make this video 2 months ago, but I had various delays with illness, problems with my laptop and stuff. If you turn the volume up loud in this video, you'll notice there's a buzz that's going on. One of my things broke with my microphone, so I've got a kind of temporary replacement, which I need to replace that cable, and then hopefully we won't have a buzz. But there's a buzz going on right now, so I apologise for that. Anyway, the video's here now. I'm sorry again for the delay, but let's get into it. So the layout of this video, we've got 4 sections to go through. The first section is just quite a quick section. It's going to be having a look at how you should generally set up your hotbar. It's very important though, and it's a key thing which I think gets missed by some people. It's something which you never really see what other people are doing. You probably know the way I set up my hotbar if you watch any of my videos. There's a certain way I do it, and that's what I'm going to be talking about, because I think even if you have the correct build and you have the right skills on and stuff, if you have them in the wrong positions, like mainly on the wrong bar, then you can end up fumbling with your keys the whole time, and just having a lot of issue with that. So I think it's important to go through that first. The next thing, also in this section, we're going to talk about farming. It's the only place in this video where I'm going to talk about farming, but the rest of it, it's talking about other stuff. So the next section is detailing the skill points, and detailing stuff on the skill points and how many skill points we're going to put into the different things to create a build. Like, what's the sort of optimum build that we're going to go for initially and work towards, and do nothing else until we reach that point, and then ultimately where do we want to go from there if we had all the skill points in the world. So that's going to be looking at lots of things there, doing some deep analysis to get something which then will refer to later on in this video. The third section is talking about, like I mentioned earlier, using the skills to achieve great damage output or great defense, and how they play into that, which ones play into it more, and then also how you can actually use them in order to get great damage output or defense. And then the 4th section is talking about builds. So that will be different levels of skill points, different builds. Some of this is going to be going slightly off from what I mentioned earlier on in this section too, where I'm talking about the sort of optimum builds you want to get to, with the skill points where you put them and stuff. But I'm going to be doing, a bit of varied stuff, talking about one skill in particular, for example, trap. I do not mention that earlier on. I say it's just, you just don't get it. But then in this later section, I will be mentioning a build which includes trap. So anyway, overall this video should give you a great idea of how to use the class, and give you some ideas of how you want to do it yourself. It should include all the information. I will not be mentioning skill runes in this video, because that will be episode 8, and this video I want to be something which stands the test of time. So no matter what new skill runes and stuff they bring out, this one will still be valid, and it's something which you can refer to. And then I'll just update the skill runes video if they bring out enough skill runes that things are changed there. So getting on with this video, we're just going to section 1, talking about the general hotbar setup. So here we have, oh no, sorry, I was going through this earlier on, we're in the wrong place. So here we have something which I'm going to probably be using. I think I use this screenshot later on in this presentation. So it's got some extra information which we don't need to worry about. What we want to look at here is talking about bar 1 and bar 2. So this bar at the bottom is the tab 1, the bar 1 of the skills, and then these other 3 are 3 different variants of bar 2, which I'll build stuff later on in this video. So bar 1 I like to use for all the long cooldown skills, the buffs, and the skills not needed in a rush. Some people like to do the bars the other way around, so they put these on bar 2 and then the other stuff on bar 1, but personally I like to have all the buffs there ready. As soon as I go into a map, they're there, I put them on, and then I flip to the other bar and play with the other bar. So this is the kind of one which you just flick to do certain things. You can see here we've got the barbed arrows, we've got these 2 buffs. They're things which you want to slap on right at the start. And then you've got both of these. These both have cooldown of 30 seconds, so you don't use them that often. They may be a little bit more situational or whatever, and so you use them at those times. Saying that, they're not so situational, but anyway, they're ones which you don't use from that much. Bar 2, you can see I've color-coded everything to kind of give a better idea of what I'm talking about, which skills I'm talking about, what I'm classifying these skills as. So if you look here at like spam skills, for example, we've got decoy and first aid. They're coming under this classification because you pretty much want to use them as soon as they come off cooldown. It's not always the case, but they're skills which you just want to use as soon as they come off cooldown. So you want them to be there on the bar which you're sat on, so you can see when they come off cooldown and you use them immediately. And then we've got things like the quick reaction skills, which obviously anything which you need to use as a quick reaction to something that's going on in the battle, you want to have right there ready in the bar which you're on. So that's why they're there. Then we've got the spam skills. I've already spoken about that. The attacks. So just general attacks. These don't need to be in it quite so much, but attacks typically have lower cooldowns. Volley here, I think it's like a 5... that's bad, I don't know. It's a 5-second cooldown. Sorry, I do know that one. It's a 5-second cooldown. It goes to 10 if you get it to 99. It's just to make sure that I do know. Right, so anyway, the attacks you want to have on this bar, just because that's generally what you're doing. You're doing buffs on bar 1 and attacks on bar 2. And then short cooldown skills, of course, you want Arcane Arrow to be on the bar which you're sat on, because you're going to be spamming it frequently. So I hope that makes sense, and just having that general idea is really good for putting things on the right tab, and you'll find everything goes a lot smoother than if you mess things up at all. It's quite obvious to me if I change my build or something and I mess it up with where things are, then I instantly start having problems. So it should be something which you naturally learn quite easily, but that's how I like to set things up. So this is for PvP now. So that was PvE before. This is a PvP build. You can see the bar 1's actually exactly the same, and then the bar 2, it's just including again some of those attack skills. That's a spam skill there. We've got the situational skill. This one's a spam skill there, and sorry, when I say spam, I mean that's a short cooldown skill. And then we've got concussive arrow, which is again, it's an attack. It's maybe a reaction skill because you want to stun them at a particular time. So it all makes sense of why you'd want these on this thing. And actually, if you just look at the cooldowns on them, it's 5 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, and then 10 seconds, 7 or 8 seconds. Oh, I'm testing myself now. And then 20 seconds. And then if you look at these, it's like 30, 30, not applicable, 30, 30. So just by the cooldowns, you can tell, it makes sense to put them in the 2 different tabs like that. Then we've got we've got farming. This is the only place I'm going to talk about farming. This bottom bar is for if you're actually manually farming. The top bar is for your auto farming. Now these aren't necessarily optimal. I'm not an archer player myself. I did some testing. I've done lots of archer farming and stuff for various videos which I've never ever made, and I plan to. So this may be something which you maybe want to do slightly differently, or you hear better things from other archers, but this is what I would personally recommend. So the first thing here is spread shot. Now that is pretty much your bog standard. You only do spread shot. The other skills are just like supplementary to it. They just help you out a little bit, Spreadshot is the one which you really want to use. And if you go back to my episode 1 video, I talk about why and show things. There's a link to my Archer 360 Spreadshot tutorial, which is not the best video, but it's okay at showing it at least. So that's really what you need for farming. Then the other things, the reason why I'm including these, so this one, Concussive Arrow with the Dark Scaroon specifically, what that does is it turns into a little arrow effect where it hits. It can be useful for taking out a little group of barrels, or something missed maybe by the Spreadshot wasn't taken out. Then you can use this to kind of quickly take that out. Rain of Arrows, no particular Scaroon here. This will take out a group of enemies. It's a bit slower to use than Concussive Arrow, so that's why you want to have Concussive Arrow for those situations. But Rain of Arrows can go over a wall, so it can be useful if there's something just round a corner or something that you don't want to then have to run, then use Concussive Arrow, then run back. Decoy here, this is an unusual one. With the particular Scaroon, the holy one at the moment, that is Festive Spirit, it will pull enemies together and then explode after a few seconds. Now, the explosion is really why you want to use this here. The pulling enemies together doesn't do that much, really. So the explosion is the useful thing. You can put it around corners and stuff like Rain of Arrows. The difference is that the explosion happens after a couple of seconds. So really this is like, it's a kind of alternative to Rain of Arrows. Saying this now, I can't remember the exact reason why this is really useful and stuff, but like, as in like why you need both of these. But I just remember from playing and stuff and testing them out, like it's very useful to have this as an extra option and stuff. I think maybe the pull effect can come into play sometimes, can be useful. I can't remember exactly. And then you've got Ballista. Ballista is one that is commonly used by all good archer farmers. There are a couple of different Scaroons you can use for it. You can see I've got the nature one here. That is Venom Turret. And the reason why I picked that nature one is because the arrows hit an area of effect. So they will take out the enemies a lot faster. And that can be very useful to, basically you put it in the middle of a group of enemies and it will take out all those enemies over the course of a couple of seconds. You can place it over a wall, so you can there's a particular point in Inner Circle where the map splits in two and you can go along one path and then you put the ballista down on the other path and it takes out the enemies down there without you ever having to run down there. Now the other variant, the other Scaroon for ballista is the holy one. I think it's called Holy Ballista, might just be that simple. So that does damage to the area which you place it on. However, I believe the damage isn't high enough to actually take out enemies when you're not in the normal story maps. When you're in the farming maps, it doesn't take them out, so it only really destroys the boxes and that kind of stuff. So I prefer the nature turret or the fire turret which hit an area. So anyway, that's those skills which I would recommend for farming. Went into a bit of depth there. The auto farming, I would say in most cases auto farming messes up, the skills lock and then it just does basic attacks. That's the problem with auto farming in general. Archers seem to get this a lot more than wizards do from my testing, which is a shame. So ultimately it doesn't really matter, but putting Spreadshot on here is good, and then these are other skills which help out. The Fire Scaroon in Mark of Death here, it's quite good at taking out a group of enemies because it marks the target and then also does fire damage to everything around when it initially gets used, which can be handy for auto farming. So anyway, that's the stuff there. Talking about farming, we can now go back to the presentation. So the second section of this video is detailing what skill points you want to put in. Into things. Now, for this section, I'm going to first of all go through the passives and the active skills, and I'm going to be going through the different parts of combat, the different types of combat, and where which skills you want to have at certain levels of skill points and stuff. Basically, working out whether there's any contradictions between the different types of content. Now, slight spoiler, there aren't any contradictions if you really, analyze it. But we're going to talk about what we need for the different types of content and what's useful and stuff to then work out, okay, what do we need in our build that we're going to try and create. So, as I'm going through this stuff, you may not be able to follow it completely because there will be quite a bit of information or whatever flying around. But then I'm going to collect it together as we're actually going to look at the sort of essential build that we want to create, and then where we want to go from there. Just a second. I've got a bit of a sore throat. I've got to keep topping up with water. Okay, so looking at this first bit, passive skills. This is an extract from the guide which I referred to earlier on. We're not going to go through it in full, sorry. We're just going to look at the important bits. So the essential skills, we want these all at 10 out of 99. It's especially important to have mana drain at 10 out of 99 because barbed arrows is going to be sucking up a lot of mana. Barbed arrows is an essential part of the class for getting damage output. You're going to be doing basic attacks, and this simply just reduces the cost of using it. So it's very important to have that at 10 out of 99. Spirit you can have at 5 when you're on lower lower number of skill points in total, just like with the other classes, except here it's actually even less important because mana drain is the important one. And then the useful ones, these are kind of useful. They give a bit of a boost, but they're not doing that much for you. A lot of archers like to put haste on to have extra attack speed, but 20 extra attack speed really doesn't do much at all. It only makes any difference if you're like in the certain range where it does make a difference, but like honestly it's pretty useless to have on the class. It's less useless than these ones above. But anyway, intelligence, it can be useful to put 10 points into this for an extra 100 mana. That can be good even earlier on in the game, and then later on increasing it to 99 for the 400. That's quite a good one there, but it's not essential, so it's not in this section. So that's passives, and then moving on to the active skills. Now there are 5 types of content in the game. There's farming, PvP, general PvE. General PvE is the kind of events and tournaments where you're having to engage in combat with the enemies. It's not farming where they just instantly die, and it's obviously not PvP because you're not playing other people. So general PvE you want to set up for, but it's not including the tough PvE. So tough PvE is talking about the master maps or the extremely difficult content where you maybe want to do things slightly differently because you can't really get hit by the enemies. You're always going to be using potions in this, like especially the cooldown potion makes a very big difference to the way you use skills and the way you're going to be doing it. So tough PvE, you might be playing a bit differently, and you might want a slightly different build because of that. Now the thing is, master maps and tough PvE in general isn't going to be coming up that much. Most of the game could be classified under general PvE, and you just have the sort of general tactics to face it. Tough PvE, because what we're doing here is we're trying to create a build that kind of fits everything, and that you don't want to like have some unusual things about it which then don't work in other aspects of the game. Tough PvE, if you really need to change things to do it there, I would say you could just reskill for the tough PvE, do that stuff, and then reskill back to your general build, so we don't need to cover it in this video. Guild raids, again in the similar way. Guild raids, you can have some slightly unusual differences, the main one being barbed arrows. So barbed arrows for like almost all the aspects of the game, the types of content, you want to have barbed arrows at just 10 out of 99. Putting it up to 99 means the mana cost goes ridiculously high, that your mana just drains almost immediately, unless you have a mana potion on, in which case it's totally fine and you have infinite mana. So barbed arrows you want to keep at 10, however in guild raids, because you're going to be having the potions active and it's all about doing tons more damage, barbed arrows at 99 only adds a little bit more damage on, but where you want to do as much damage as possible, it does help out. So that's the kind of main difference between other stuff and guild raids, where you do want to put barbed arrows to 99. However, you definitely wouldn't do that as a general build. You would reskill, do your guild raids loads, and then reskill back, taking barbed arrows back down to 10. So we don't need to cover that in this bit. So now we just have 3 types of content, which we're looking at in order to work out what we need on the class, what's essential for each different part of it. So the first thing to look at is farming. The only essential thing you need is a low cooldown on spread shot. So basically don't take it beyond 40 points. If you do take it beyond 40 points, then it's going to slow down your farming. But actually, in general, you just keep it 10 really here. But just saying, we're looking at a range here of 10 to 40. This is what we can have, and it won't screw up our farming. It won't make it really bad. So we can do it like that. So that's all you need for farming. There's nothing else that's important. It's just the low cooldown on spread shot. PvP now, the essential things on this. Now for PvP, a lot of skills can come into play. They can come in use. So at the bottom here, I've got the skills which are not needed. So rather than listing all the different skills which are like useful or essential or whatever, I've just listed the ones which are not needed in PvP. So these are the different ones there. It should be pretty self-explanatory, as I talked about them in the previous videos, why those ones aren't needed. All the other ones you want to have at least 10 out of 99. That's essential. So the essential things in terms of how many skill points to have on certain things. On anything with status effects, that is like stun, silence, slow, root and stuff, we want to have low cooldown on them, and for that reason it's best to have them at 10 out of 99. Now, when I say best, I mean essential, because if you start pushing these up, your PvP gameplay is just gonna deteriorate, I think. Even if, you maybe get a bit more damage on something, it's a lot better to have just the low cooldown on it, and then have the damage coming from the damage skills rather than the status effect skills. It's also, as I mentioned before, and you'll see throughout this bit, a low cooldown on barbed arrows. You don't want that beyond 10. Not low cooldown, low mana cost, because that would just mess up everything if you have a high mana cost. It's especially important in PvP because we don't have access to mana potions and stuff in PvP, so you need to be able to manage your mana very well. And this is the first mention of a skill having 99 points in, and it's actually essential. So first aid is incredibly good in PvP. It's essential in order to make the class work well. In low level PvP and stuff, you can get away with stuff because the other people won't have effective builds. They will be missing certain parts of it, certain skill runes and stuff. But once you get to a point where you actually want to be able to play PvP properly, and you've got enough skill points and stuff, first aid is really what you want to get there. Yeah, it's very important to have. Now, useful extra things which you can have in PvP, there's only a couple here, and that is smoke screen to 99. This gives you the stun immunity. It's very, very handy, but it's not absolutely essential. It's just going to be useful. And the other thing is some more damage on volley. Now, volley is quite interesting. So on the other classes, on knight and wizard, the damage skills, you don't really want to take them beyond 10 out of 99 because the cooldown increases, and it means that your overall damage per second and stuff, the damage that's coming from the skills, lowers. But archer's very different because you have most of your damage coming from basic attacks. So when you use a skill, you're stopping yourself from using basic attacks while you're using the skill. So you want to do as much damage as possible with the skill use, so that your overall damage output doesn't actually lower and that kind of stuff. Now, PvP, it's very important to have good damage output coming from your stuff, good damage per second and stuff, and volley is one of those skills which gives you great damage. So also, not only is it good for just generally on archer, but it's especially useful in PvP, where volley is great for doing a big chunk of damage in one go. And so some people, they argue putting it all the way to 99. Now, I talked about this in that first episode of the Archer Builds video, and I gave all my reasons and stuff, so I'm not going to go through it again here, but I would say putting this up is very useful for PvP. So having it in the range 10 to 64 is good. I'd say no more than 64, because then the cooldown starts increasing too much that it's not there when you want to use it. So anyway, that's that there. We've already talked about the skills not needed, so everything else is essential to have at 10 out of 99. Now talking about PvE, so the only essential thing here is the barbed arrows having the low mana cost on it. We talked about that already, so I'm not going to do it again. The skills not needed here, so we need most of the skills at 10 out of 99. They have some kind of use somewhere, and these are the skills which are not needed. Now, I've put a few in brackets here, and that is because these ones, they can be used in certain builds, which we'll see later on in this video when I'm talking about builds. But so these ones which you can ignore initially, but you may want to have for particular builds at a later time. Or if you want to go down that certain route, then perhaps you want to pick these skills. I'd also like to mention at this point, on the hunt and death arrow and stuff, these advanced skills I'm mentioning as not useful. That's the reason why that is because at the time I make this video, they haven't really added skill runes for these skills, these advanced skills. So lots of them are not very viable at the moment. And if at a later time skill runes have come out and they do awesome things, then please ignore the fact that I'm saying they're useless here and take them into account, and maybe you'll want to use them in these different parts of the content. So anyway, the useful things which you can have for PvE, beyond the sort of general essential stuff. Falconer up to 99. This gives it very high damage. It lowers the cooldown massively from the 300 seconds, I think it is, down to 60. Now what this mainly does is it means that Stone Bear becomes viable. You can actually keep using the Stone Bear and having it as a good defense skill. So this is useful. It's not essential, but it's nice to have as an extra way of putting a bit of defense on, because archers always, they want a bit more defense with this stuff. High damage ballista. So ballista's damage becomes incredibly good when you get 99 points in it. It's very, very good for just increasing the damage output. However, because it's pet damage, it doesn't really do much in PvP. So anyway, that's why it's only here. But it's very good to have. Not essential, but it will do a lot for you. First aid, we mentioned it already in the PvP, saying it's perfect to have there. You really want to have it there. In PvE, it's good too. It's not essential, but it's going to be helpful. Then low cooldown on status effects. This is not an essential thing like it is in PvP, but it is, again, for the same reasons it's useful. And volley, once again, exactly the same as we saw in PvP, having more damage on it. For the reasons I've already explained, it's a good thing to have. And then the last thing is to put decoy up to 99. Now this is a personal preference thing. I think I went into quite good detail on it in the previous video in this series when I talked about decoy, and I talked about the pros and the cons of having 10 and 99, so I'm not going to go into detail here, but it's something which some people find useful. I would say with a cooldown potion it's very good, so it's something to think about as a possible useful thing to have. This is actually for tough PvE, which I haven't talked about. This is one of those things that it can come into play quite a bit more to use this, because you're going to have a cooldown potion active there, and the way it makes you invincible is kind of handy. So anyway, now we've gone through the different types of content, let's collect all that together and have a look at actually how many skill points we're going to have to put into different things. So this is the bit where if you didn't follow the previous stuff I was going through, then you don't need to worry, because I'm going to be showing here, okay, this is what we're actually trying to achieve. So the first thing to do is to look at the essential stuff for farming PvP and PvE, and what that actually gives us in terms of a build and what it looks like. So the passives I'll go through first. These are the passives which I said to put on. Those 10 in each of those, the 5 in the spirit, that's all you need there. And then ultimately where you want to go with that to add sort of extra useful stuff is to bring spirit up to 10, adding in intelligence and adding in PvP health. Now you could take intelligence to 99 as well. That's obviously gives just a straight up buff, but it's sort of less useful, less efficient with the skill points. So we need 55 points in passives and then 169 ultimately when we've got the other stuff. I'll show you now in a screenshot what this actually looks like. This is what it looks on the passive screen. You can see the 10 points in each of these things, the 5 points in spirit there. The next thing is the active skills. So this is collecting together what is essential on the class. Now it's 219 points. That is a lot. That's mainly because first aid is an essential skill to have for the PvP. So anyway, this is the section here. Things to point out here: we're missing shrapnel arrow and falconer. Oh, sorry, falconer there. And then these 3 advanced skills. Otherwise, everything's at 10 and first aid's at 99. So I'll just show that on the screen. That might be easier for some of you to see. You can see the 10 points in each of those things. Missing shrapnel arrow, missing falconer, and missing these 3 things. Now, every other skill comes into play somewhere in PvE or PvP. It will be useful and you'll want to have it on the class. I would say this is the point you want to reach before you do anything else. Like before you put any points into volley, putting it further, or maybe putting falconer onto the class or something like. Sorry, excuse me there. This is where you want to get to, with the passives here at these 55 points in here, and to this point on the active skills. Now, in terms of which order you do these in, it's kind of hard to say, and we'll go into later on when we're looking at builds and at different levels of skill points, but clearly first aid is the one you'll leave until last, because it only becomes effective in the sort of higher range, and the number of skill points it takes to get there is enormous, so you're much better off getting all the other skills up to their point of just 10 points, and then the last thing you do is getting first aid on the class. So one thing which some people find difficult, newer players this is stopping at 10 out of 99. Now, I think I might have said this earlier in previous videos, I'm not sure exactly, but originally in the game, there are only 10 skill points to put into each of the skills. That was the final level of them. And between 10 and 99, it actually just alters the skill in some unusual way. So for some of them, there's no reason at all. For some of them, it's like really good. And what you need to get in your head is that at 10 skill points, the skill is actually finished. And it's just whether or not the point from 10 to 99 is going to be good for that particular skill, for what you want to get out of it. So don't sort of push to sort of 15, 20, like there's no point. Just stop at 10 and that is done, and then it's like certain skills you want to take up beyond 10. So we will now move on further on. So all these skill points, that is 260 skill points in total. It's quite a lot to get, but like I said, first aid is the last thing you want to get up. And we'll look at builds later on in this video where you can kind of like, what you do in that stage before. But that is where you want to get to. The first 264 skill points should be going into these different places. That's what I'm saying is optimum. Now going beyond there, we're looking at the useful stuff, which I've listed above in different types of content, like, where can you actually get a benefit past this initial essential point that you've reached. And there are 307 skill points you can put in to get a bonus. So this is them listed. This bit in brackets here at the beginning is saying which part of the content it's helping in. So, if you're not interested in PvP, then you can ignore this PvP one and, do this other stuff. If you're not interested in getting a bonus for PvE because you just find it's totally easy and stuff, then you can ignore some of these ones which only give you a boost in PvE. So anyway, taking Smoke Screen, this gives you the stun immunity, like we said. Falconer, it makes it good for Stone Bear, like we said. Ballista, getting this 99, gives you enormous damage output from it in PvE. Volley, we said this is useful for both of them, both PvE and PvP. It just makes the skill a bit better, I think, by having some more damage on it, and the cooldown doesn't increase so much when you take it to 40. 40 is a really good stopping point. Decoy, I've talked about that before. Volley here, again mentioning Volley. Now this is talking about the stage of 40 to 64, so you may want to take it beyond 40, but only if your elemental stats are low. I would say, ironically, by the point which you want to actually get Volley up, your skill point, you probably have elemental stats above 200%, but anyway, this is something which I just wanted to mention, that if your elemental stats are low, then you do get a benefit taking it beyond 40, and maybe up to about 64 or so. So once you've done all that stuff, that's 695 skill points in total. It doesn't include this extra little boost of Volley, doesn't include Decoy 99, because that's a sort of preference thing, and then doesn't include Intelligence 99. But if you put all those skill points into there, then the class is complete, absolutely complete, and I'd say any more skill points aren't really going to benefit you, unless advanced skills are better in the future and you want to help that. But like, the class is complete if you get 695 skill points. And I said Wizard, this says Wizard at the top, but I'm just using the same screenshot because it's exactly the same for both. This is kind of ultimately where you want to reach on the passives. You could have 99 in intelligence, but that's whether or not you need the mana. So this is kind of where you want to reach with the passives, and then this is ultimately where you want to reach with the active skills. So as you can see here, we're still missing the Shrapnel Arrow. Right now that just isn't a useful skill at all. Maybe in the future it will be. We're missing these 3 advanced skills. Again, these may be useful in the future. And then we've got the 40 points in Volley. Everything else is 10, apart from First Aid, Ballista and Falconer for PvE stuff, and Smoke Screen for the PvP. So this is the ultimate build, I would say, on Archer, if you can reach this point. It doesn't allow for every kind of everything you might want to do with the class. I'm talking later with the unusual builds, but this is where you want to reach, I would say. Oh, I clicked the wrong button there. Okay. So the last thing to cover in this is maybe which order you want to level up things beyond this original build that you create for yourself. So the order I would say is Ballista first. You may have guessed this already. Ballista is a huge damage increase in PvE. Ballista just becomes a ridiculously powerful skill if you get it to 99. So I would recommend you do that first, as the first thing. After that, next thing is to increase Volley. The main reason is it boosts both PvE and PvP. This is just a general buff to the skill everywhere. It's very useful. Beyond that, I'm saying Falconer to 10 first of all, just because it's quite cheap. 10 skill points isn't too bad. it means Falconer is opened up as a skill. It's not going to be super effective with Stone Bear, but it will be possible to bring the Stone Bear out, and then you can have it there initially, and then when it dies, you just can't reuse it. But that's fine. For some content, you may want to bring the Stone Bear out at the beginning, so having 10 skill points in it is very handy. Next thing to do is Smoke Screen. Now this is just for PvP. If you're not interested in PvP, you can skip this. If you're really interested in PvP, then you could bring this maybe to the front as the first thing you do, after getting First Aid up, which will be the last thing you do there. So anyway, that's for PvP. Next thing is Falconer, to get that up and to complete it, and then it will become a useful skill for PvE stuff. And then you've got Volley at the end there. Now I said ironically, by the time you get to do this, your elemental stats should be over 200%, so you actually won't want to use this. So you don't really need to have this in there. You can probably tell I don't like doing that. I don't think it's useful. So anyway, that's the end of this section. I hope it's clear enough with what you want to achieve with the builds and stuff. So with where you're putting the skill points. So moving into the next section, the third section of this video, if I can scroll to the right bit here, if it'll let me. There we go. So this is talking about using the skills together to achieve great damage output, and using the skills together to create great defense. This first bit is talking about damage output. So before you look at any of the bits above, I'm just going to point out these things earlier on. These bits at the bottom, I mean. So all the skills with a star on them are ones that can be part of a basic attack build. So when looking at creating a build with the Archer class, you can focus on the skills and stuff, but it's just not very effective. There's the so-called basic attack build, which has been in the game since the beginning of Archer, where you have various buffs that then increase the damage you do, and they add extra effects on your basic attacks. So then you pretty much just use those, and then certain other skills like Ballista is good there, and then Falconer to tank with things. Decoy isn't in here because it doesn't do damage, but all the star skills can be very easily be part of a basic attack build, whereas the other ones kind of do slightly different stuff. Right, so talking through the damage, talking through the skills, sorry, I have separated them into different sections to point out which ones do the most damage and which ones do less damage. This is taking into account their cooldown, all kinds of stuff. So the first thing to note is Barbed Arrows is absolutely essential for damage output on the class. It's a straight up buff to your damage. You can even just turn it on and then swap the skill out for something else, so there's absolutely no reason not to have it there, other than if you're having mana trouble, but if you keep it at 10 out of 99, then you shouldn't have mana trouble. The next thing to talk about is the primary damage skills. So these, I would say, are the most important damage dealers other than Barbed Arrows. And the last one here, Death Arrow, I'm putting on because I believe in the future with Skurrans and stuff, it is going to be a very good damage skill, but as I'm making this video, if you're watching it as it's been released and stuff, you may be looking at this going, why is Death Arrow on there? And it's because right now it doesn't have any skill rune really that does any damage, so it's just, it doesn't do the damage. But I think it will be among there, it will be as good as Volley. It will be while Volley is very high damage to a single target, Death Arrow is very high damage, slightly less than Volley, but goes to multiple targets. So these are the really good damage skills on the class. You've got Ballista, like I was saying earlier, huge damage in PvE once you've got it up to 99 points. Mark of Death, anyone who's played Archer should know this is an incredible boss killer. It's going to be a big one there. And Volley, this is your most powerful actual skill that will do a hit rather than basic attack stuff. And yeah, that's going to be doing a lot of damage. So when you want to do damage, these are the ones you really want to focus on using and having on the build in order to make sure you'll have good damage output from the build. Then we have the secondary damage skills. So these ones, they help out, but they don't do a whole lot to actually doing damage output. It's like when you use them, they'll sort of do top up damage, but not that much. On Archer especially, because you're getting your damage from basic attacks, they're not using these ones here at the beginning. These ones they stop you from doing basic attacks while you're using them, so they don't really affect your damage overall, your damage per second. They actually probably lower it. So anyway, these 3 skills, they each do a bit of damage. It's notable, but it's like just not that much. Then we've got these two. These two are buffs, basic attack buffs. So Pierce, well, we know them already. But what I'm talking about here is not the buff that they're giving to you, but actually the the damage from the runes. So I wanted to make it clear that the damage that you get from the skill runes isn't super significant. It's not as high as like these primary damage ones. What you get from Mark of Death, the skill runes on that is a lot more than you get from Pierce and Sniper. But they are, you could classify them as secondary damage skills rather than minor. They're definitely not minor. Then you've got like Falconer here. This does reasonable damage in PvE. You've got Trap, and then the runes from First Aid. So there's only one skill rune as I'm making this, but it actually does some reasonable damage. So that's in there. It can be classified as a damage skill, even if you're using this just for the healing or the defense or whatever. It will be doing damage as well. And then we've got these minor damage skills. So these ones, if you use them, they are doing nothing other than lowering your damage output. They are not used for any reason other than for the other effects which they do. So Spreadshot here, you can see this is only used in farming. It's not used anywhere else because it just does too little damage for the use of it. And then Smokescreen, there are some skill runes for this which do a bit of damage, but it's so minor that I would not recommend sort of thinking about it as like, oh wait, I can have this and it would increase the damage that I'm going to be doing when I'm using it. But no, really, it's not significant at all. And Rain of Arrows, the damage that you get from this, because of the long cooldown, the long animation stuff, it's not really going to play into your overall damage output at all. Now, when I did this video for Wizard, what I did was I looked at the primary damage ones and the secondary damage ones, and I said like, okay, in order to have good damage output on the build, what you need to do is have a certain number of primary and secondary damage skills in order to then have enough damage output. And if you don't have enough of those, then your build is not going to be effective because you won't be able to do enough damage. For Archer, because it is the damage class, it doesn't really worry about that too much. I say here, Archers don't struggle with damage output as long as you have Barbed Arrows, which is the essential one here. You have Sniper, because I've got this listed below, but it's the buff from Sniper is just incredibly good. And then you have the relevant star skills. These are the ones which play into your basic attack build for the type of content you're playing. So, for example, Falconer, you're not going to be using in PvP. Ballista, you're not going to be using in PvP. But if you have all the other star skills, then your damage output will be fine. That's generally how it goes on Archer. If you have those star skills for the basic attack build, then you will be fine. So just reading this bit here, I can't remember what it said here. Always use Barbed Arrows and some of the star skills. Okay, so maybe not all of them, but like, include the star skills. Make sure you have them in there, and then your damage output will be fine. That's generally how it goes on Archer. So now we look at the defense skills. This is maybe a little bit less obvious, and something which I really want to talk about and give you an idea of what's going on. So for the defense skills on Archer, there's a lot more going on than people will necessarily realise or give credit to, because Archers have the worst defense of any class, but there's quite a lot which you can do with it. So these are what I would classify as the buff defense skills. So Decoy, if you have it at 99, it's going to make you invincible as long as it's alive, basically for a few seconds. It will make you invincible. It's an incredible buff that it does. The smoke screens, I've got a little star here, if I can remember why. Might be because it's part of basic attack build. Yes. No. I can't actually remember. That is really annoying. So anyway, smoke screen. This is a buff. I think it might be because... No, I can't remember. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So smoke screen, it gives you a buff which gives you defense. I say especially runes because there's a particular rune which I'm thinking of called Dark Mist, which gives you, it literally makes it give you a 50% damage reduction. So that's great for PvE stuff. And in PvP, smoke screen itself, even without any skill runes, gives you 25% damage reduction. So this this is a really good buff for helping you survive. That is easily overlooked, but it's very, very strong. It's surprisingly good in content. Mark of Death on the runes. So there are certain skill runes on Mark of Death which give you healing or that kind of thing. Yeah, I think right now it's just healing. So because this happens every few attacks you do and stuff, it's consistent enough that it is effectively like a buff, a defense buff. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact healing. I think it's something like 20% every few attacks. But if you keep attacking the target, then it does help you survive very well while you're attacking. So it's a good reason for using the skill runes with that effect on them. On the hunt, this buffs your defense. It's pretty much what it does right now. And so that is, a buff defense skill available to you. And first aid, this is a very strong one, which I've talked about before. Gives you that healing and stuff. With skill runes, it adds even extra effects. So that's a great buff you have. Now the other bit, which is less so obvious, is the control defense skills. These, I probably shouldn't have gone through all those buff ones individually, but these ones, what these will do is you'll help you control the enemy so they're not attacking you and that kind of stuff. Now the most obvious one here is decoy, because you put that down, the enemies attack it instead of you if they're closer to it than they are to you. But then quite a few other ones come into this. A particular favourite of mine is Rain of Arrows, which originally was used for the fear, but then now it's got other effects as well. And Ballista in PvP with the frost skill rune on it can be great for stopping the movement of someone, and so it can like keep knights away from you, or just generally control the movement of other people, making it harder for them to kill you. But I listed here at the end, best defense is a good offense. So archers, the general way which they do well in content, and why they were probably the best class originally, is because they have such good damage output that they can get rid of the enemies too quickly, so that the enemies don't really have a chance to attack them, or they reduce the enemies' number so there's like only actually a few enemies attacking them rather than like a huge horde. Whereas like on the other classes, they weren't able to take out the enemies quickly, so they had to tank and control loads of enemies at once, and that's why they had to use their defense skills. Whereas archers, sometimes they could just avoid using their defense skills. Like originally you could just put decoy down and then attack and kill the enemies, and the enemies wouldn't be able to kill decoy because you'd always reduce the number of enemies too quickly that they didn't have enough damage to kill it. So anyway, these ones all play into the control stuff, and what we're trying to do here is trying to work out which skills we need on a build, on our 10 hotkeys, in order to have good defense with the particular setup we're going with. So I would say, to bring it together, the stars, right, the stars are to mark which ones are the best ones, I think, that I'd say use everywhere. Yes, that's what it's talking about. So I would say in any PvE build which you create, where you're trying to choose which 10 skills you're using, I would say you've got to include 3 to 4 skills out of 4 defense. And the ones I would recommend are decoy, as I think anyone would agree with me. Smoke screen, with particular skill runes especially, it is incredibly strong. And Rain of Arrows is just a great control skill. So if you have those 3, then you should be set up for defense. First aid is another one which you can have. If you have a spare slot when you're choosing which skills you're using, first aid is going to be a big help to improving that the effectiveness of that. Any PvP build, you again want to have 3 or 4 skills for defense, and I would here recommend, instead of decoy, you have first aid, and then arcane arrow is a great extra one which you can have. I put a question mark on it. I would recommend that in almost every PvP build, because with the particular skill rune static field, I think it's static field, the control you get from that is enormous, and it's just, it's very good to have. So this is what I'd recommend for any PvP, and this is what I recommend for any PvE. These are the defense skills which you need to have in those builds. So combos, I can't remember exactly what I wanted to say with this combos, because I made this presentation like 2.5 months ago, but there are particular combos which I guess I'll go through. So the decoy and rain of arrows, this is something which I think I've shown in a few videos, and basically what this does is decoy will group all the enemies together around a particular target, and they'll be attacking the decoy and destroying it. Now, in difficult battles, they will destroy the decoy too quickly that you then don't have another decoy to put out, and that's where you maybe need to use other defense skills. However, rain of arrows is very good for helping the decoy survive. Reason is, you fire it down on the decoy, on the enemies around the decoy, and then if you have a skill which makes them stun, or otherwise they just get feared, then the enemies will stop attacking the decoy. Only really affects the small enemies, but they're the ones which typically will destroy the decoy, because if there's like an individual boss or something, it won't destroy the decoy quickly enough, or if it's just like a couple of big enemies, they tend to not destroy it quickly enough. It's when it gets surrounded by tons of little enemies, that's when the decoy will die, and that's where rain of arrows is most effective at stopping them from killing it so quickly, because it will stop the enemies attacking it. I've shown that in a few videos, I think, and it's a great PvE combo to have. Smoke screen and first aid. This is probably my favourite combo. So smoke screen with the particular screw and dark mist as well, especially, you can give the damage reduction and otherwise stop sort of small enemies from coming and attacking you and stuff. And then first aid gives you the healing and also a bit of defense. So between making yourself tanky and healing regularly, it makes you survive brilliantly well. I don't think that really needs any more explaining. It's just a great combo for tanking, which I think a lot of archers don't really give that enough credit, unless they've done high level PvP stuff and they've used this combo and then seen how actually they can survive very, very effectively. So this is the same as this first combo, but including Arcane Arrow as well. So Arcane Arrow can be useful in this to, I'm trying to think exactly now, to slow a group of enemies. Now, I don't know exactly where I was going with this combo, but I think it's maybe even though you're using decoy and rain of arrows, they're still destroying your decoy, you can use Arcane Arrow to slow the enemies so they don't actually come over to you. So rather than like you panicking and having to run and wait until decoy comes off cooldown, instead you can use Arcane Arrow to slow down the enemies so they take a while to run over from where that original decoy is, and it gives you then time to set up another decoy. I think that's where I was going with that. So that's where Arcane Arrow can come into use a bit. I think a lot of people forget that Arcane Arrow is a slow skill. It's good for that. And here this is the same, but without decoy because it's a PvP version. So between Rain of Arrows and Arcane Arrow, especially with the Silence Skurun and the Root Skurun, those two become ridiculously good at controlling where an enemy is. It's particularly good for knights, but also good against wizards and archers too. Well, not really archers actually, but it's good against wizards, especially good at knights, against knights at controlling their movement, and meaning that you don't have to like actually tank them because you're stopping them from getting close to you and being able to attack you properly. So that's how you can use the skills on Archer to do good defense. I think that's probably more important than the damage stuff, because this, most of the time, damage output on Archer is not too complicated. It's kind of there already. So that was section 3 of this video. We're now going to start talking about some builds. So I've gone through all the theory stuff. We're going to be taking a look at some fun builds, hopefully. Hopefully find them fun. To start with, we're going to talk about just 120 skill points. The reason why I pick 120 skill points is 120 is what I would say is the initial point that people kind of reach when they hit platinum level. Like 120 skill points is probably what you have by that point. So it's sort of the classic. Why is it doing that weirdly? Oh, it's probably higher up. Sorry. Confusing myself. So it's the number of skill points people reach when they hit platinum, basically, traditionally. So this first PvE build that I have here for you is, I think I can't full screen. No, I can't full screen. Okay. This one is, I think it's more of a general one. So I don't actually know these because I didn't look through them before the video. So I'm looking through with you. So we've got 50 of the essential passives. So I think for a lot of these low level builds, I have 50 essential passives. That is what I was mentioning earlier on, except minus spirit. So it has mana drain at 10 out of 10, but it has spirit at 0. This one, let's have a look at what it says. It says great basic attack build and good PvE control, but no PvP defense or volley for PvP. So this is a kind of general thing that's good for PvE. It would be good for low-level people who are just trying to do the general content and they're not looking to win in PvP. It's focused around the basic attack build, which is with barbed arrows, and then you have things like sniper and pierce. So both sniper and pierce are up at 10. You have decoy at 10 as well, because that's very important. You've got ballista at 10, because that's going to help you out a lot in PvE, especially when you're low level. That will do a lot of damage to the enemies. And you've got mark of death for taking down bosses. You've also got 5 in spread shot for farming. I think 5 is actually a good amount for low level people to put into it. It becomes perfectly reasonable at farming at this point. And barbed arrows, you don't need to put this at 10. Because most of the damage comes from the scurryings. Like, putting 5 more points in it does help, but having the points elsewhere at this point is probably better. So this is this build. I don't think I need to go through it much more, other than you can see the setup here. It's mostly on one bar. You just have the barbed arrows on bar 1 to sort of apply at the beginning, and then you flip to the other bar and use ballista whenever it comes off cooldown. The next build to look at, if I hope I didn't volley build. Yeah, okay, cool. I did flick forward twice. So this build, oh yeah, I even called it PvE build. There we go. This next build is the volley build. So this was because I didn't include volley in the last one. I was thinking, okay, what can we do to actually include a volley one, a volley build that then still has some other stuff going on with it. So the differences here, we have volley at 9. 9 just because 9 and 10, it doesn't make a huge difference, and needed this 1 point for barbed arrows, so that barbed arrows is there. Like I said with barbed arrows, it's not an important thing with so I don't want to confuse my words. It's not important to have a high number of points in it when you have not many skill points in total, because it's mostly damage from the scurryings. So anyway, we do need access to it, so it's there, 1 point in it. You then have sniper and pierce down at 5, because it's not as important as sniper. Sniper's the really important damage one. You've got mark of death at 10 again, because that's very good for damage. Ballista at 10 again, because this is like I said before, another general really good one, and decoy again. But you have a bit more PvP stuff going on here. So you've got 10 points in concussive arrow, and you've got volley with 9 points in it. The difference is, I say, less AoE control. If you don't mind me just flicking back. Oh yeah, there's no rain of arrows, that's the thing. So there's less control stuff here, but there's more damage and a little bit more focus in PvP. So this might be, I think when I created this, I decided I like it a little bit better than the previous one. The previous one is very much focused for PvE, doing well there. This one is more like a general, okay, can we make everything work at this point, where we can do both PvP and PvE. So we've got enough stuff in there to do okay in PvE, and we've got some extra little additions to do well in PvP, like this concussive arrow, which is the stun skill there. So that's what this one is. Now the next one is a fully optimized PvP build. Oh, actually, yeah, you can see here it's a normal kind of setup. Not much difference from the previous one. This next one is optimized for PvP. So I tried to make this as best as I could for PvP when you've only got this number of skill points. This involves a few kind of like unusual level of skill points on skills, as you can see. It's got the 50 essential passives as the other ones. No kind of reduction there. Volley is at 6. Well, actually, let's look at the 10 things first. So we've got Pierce and Sniper, but Pierce is only at 1 rather than the 10. It's just kind of there to like slap on for PvE stuff, I think. The cooldown is a bit long, so you can't have it on the whole time with this, which is a bit annoying, but it's there to use if you need it. We've got Mark of Death still at 10. We've got no Ballista in this one. Barbed Arrows at 7, which is an unusual amount. Don't ask me to kind of explain why everything, because like I said, made this 2.5 months ago. We've got First Aid 1 point in this. That's so you can use this, but obviously you haven't got 99 skill points to put into it, but it can give you a little bit of healing. The main reason to have this is for the scurrying, so you can put the scurrying on and for 1 point in something, it's actually pretty good to have this. We've got space on the hotbar. You can see it's only got 9 skills, so I decided that's one good little point to put into it. And then we've also got the addition of Arcane Arrow. This is because, like I was mentioning earlier, great control skill for knights and archers too. And we've got the Rain of Arrows back, so we can have the silent skill and stuff and do some crazy stuff there. We've also got Smoke Screen, which is a good defense skill in PvP. So yeah, we've got some good stuff going on, some unusual level of skill points, but overall I think this is very optimized. The thing is, it does not include decoy, spread shot or ballista, which means no decoy is a big problem in PvE stuff. I just couldn't work it in because the thing is, you need 10 points in decoy in order for it to be effective, because you need that low cooldown. So there was no way to make an optimized PvP build without losing some things like decoy, spread shot for farming, and ballista, which is going to be a good help in PvE. So this is PvP optimized, that you can maybe reskill to do this and then reskill back. But anyway, that's a PvP build for you. The next one we're going to go through is, I want to talk about, do I need to talk about that? The array of that? Not really. We went through that earlier on in the video, didn't we? So 160 skill points now. The reason why I'm saying 160 is a little bit beyond, just what you can do with a few more skill points than 120. 160 also, it's a point where you hit the level where you can put skill points into almost everything that you want. You won't have absolutely everything, but you'll have pretty much everything you want by 160 skill points. And this is the reason why I don't really go into huge detail on low number of skill points. I get various new players asking me like, oh, I have 80 skill points, can you help me create a build? And I just have to reply to them, sorry, but like, you can't create a viable build at 80 skill points. And you're going to level up, reasonably quickly, and then reach a point where it's like, actually, you can have everything that you want. So it's better just to tell them like, okay, this is what you want to achieve, and do what you like beyond that before that point. See what you can do, and just expect like you're going to have to take it that you're not going to have a complete build. So anyway, once you hit this point, I'd say there's only one build which you want to do. Notable thing is there's no spirit passive, which is the sort of passive mana drain. Passive mana regeneration. Then looking at the other things, we have spread shot of 5. Again, you don't really need that above 5 for farming. It's useful, but when you don't have the skill points, don't do it. Arcane Arrow, the cooldown on this is very low, so you can actually have it only a few skill points in it, and it be very effective for PvP. We have the decoy and the other stuff, which we want everything. Everything is 10, and then first aid is 1. So I would say once you hit 160 skill points, I wouldn't really do anything other than this build, because this gives you everything which you want and that you'll have at high level skill points, just minus the first aid, and these things are the things which you can cut back a few skill points in it. I was saying earlier as well, barbed arrows, you can have this at lower number of skill points. Not great to do, but before you hit 160, you can maybe have fewer skill points in that. You can maybe ignore concussive arrow because that's only for PvP, and that kind of thing. That's what you should do in those lower bits. So that is the builds, and then I don't think, are there any more? Yes. We have got more. So the last little bit of this video is talking about what you do past 160 skill points and the ultimate builds that you'll be trying to create, as well as doing a few unusual ones, and maybe using the skills in a slightly different way to how you would do. So I say here, revisit earlier section showing optimal path. I'll just flick back to it, but this is what I was saying earlier on about you want to achieve. Scroll down again. Sorry. You want to achieve this build first of all, and then you want to add these things in the order which I say, and then you get to the point where like, okay, I now have everything, and I can do everything that I want to do. So talking past 160 skill points, really what you want to look at is the sort of ultimate builds that you want to get to. So scrolling down, I think, yeah, just go to the screenshots. So we're just going to look at screenshots for the rest of this video. These are PvE builds. So we looked at this screenshot earlier on, but it's now got some extra bits in it. So you can ignore these two bits at the bottom where I'm talking about what order where to put skills into the hotbar. So there are 3 different builds here, which I'm talking about. This is the first one, and then this is the second one, and then we've got the third one here. All of them have the same bar 1. I would say these are like essential skills to have in any PvE build. And so then these are just slightly different variants to do different things. So this first one, you can see here, general purpose. It's got volley in there for the extra damage stuff. Trying to see what's different here. So we got the decoy. You want decoy in most of them. You've got smoke screen and first aid. Like I said, you can use these 2 skills to tank very effectively. Reign of Horror can help with the decoys. So you've got a lot of tanking control stuff here going on, and then a damage skill. And along with the basic attack stuff, you know, it's going to work well. That's general purpose. It's going to work well. There's nothing really unusual about it. This one is a no decoy setup. So most people go with decoy, but there was actually a trend in the old days because decoy was overpowered. Archers would challenge themselves to go no decoy in an event and see if they could do it, and it was good. It was a really good way of like people testing out the other skills and seeing how they could do things. So this is a no decoy variant. The only difference is putting in arcane arrow instead of decoy. Now what this is, I said exploitation of heavy slow. So you can combo various slows together in order to make enemies fly around, or otherwise just have extreme difficulty getting to you. And so what this build hopes to achieve is literally just that. So you attack them with basic attacks, and then when there's a horde coming at you that's going to be a problem, you spam these different skills and send them flying around or like getting stuck. The reason why I'd say this build is harder to play and it's not as good. Decoy is just generally the fail-safe way to do, especially because you can keep the enemies at range, so you do more damage to them. But this is an important kind of thing to note for when you're doing some of the content that's like a lot harder and you're struggling to really control the enemies, they're just overpowering your decoy and that kind of stuff, then maybe start including arcane arrow and using slow skills and trying to see if you can stop the enemies from getting to you. Then we've got this third build, which is this is if you do level 99 decoy. And now this is a very out there build that I love, but every archer doesn't love, and that is using level 99 decoy to tank at close range. So this is, well, yeah, I call it a melee build. This is literally a close range build, so your damage output is lower, but you can do some really cool stuff with this. So trap is a skill that, you know, go watch my previous video where I talk about trap, but like you can be putting this down and have the enemies right next to you, but none of them are going to damage you because of the decoy which you're putting behind you. That's the best way to do this. You put the decoy right behind you, so when enemies hit you, they do no damage. You have them at close, you tank them, and then you use trap to do high damage. Now, in the future, if there are skurruns which added a trap which make it do very high damage, then this could be a very effective build. And I would certainly have a lot of fun doing it. It's a very different way to play Archer, and it's surprisingly effective when you use the skills right. So that's there. You've still got Ballista, remember, which, because the enemies will collect around you, you'll get all the enemies there, and the Ballista will take them out nicely as well. So the last thing to note is barbed arrows we have in slot 1 just here in tab 1. However, if you want to use Falconer, which you might remember I mentioned it earlier on when I was talking about it being good for PvE and stuff, because it's got that very high cooldown, you can either just use barbed arrows, switch to Falcon, and then switch back to barbed arrows if you think you're going to die and that kind of stuff. But like, if you have it at the 60-second cooldown, you have Stone Bear in it, and you want to be using the Stone Bear, the way I'd recommend you do it is you use barbed arrows at the beginning of the map, you then swap it out to Falconer, and use the Stone Bear, and then you know, go into the combat, and then it's there in your tab 1, skill 1. So you're able to use those 11 skills, because barbed arrows only needs to be put on each time you die. So that is PvE builds. I had a look at 3 there. It's kind of difficult to come up with something other than this sort of general purpose one, because the general purpose one does include everything. It's like, these 2 are kind of unusual ones. It's the no decoy and then melee build. I mean, Most people won't want to use those, but they are there because I was trying to think of something fun. So now we look at PvP builds. So in here, we've got very, very similar. I think that's the same, actually. Is that the same as... Yes, that is the same. This is the same as bar 1 on PvE. Oh, I said wizards there. I thought I panicked for a second. I was like, oh no, did I write the wrong word? Did I write the wrong class? So Ballista is very useful in PvP for controlling knights and wizards. That is with the slow Skurun in it. If you don't use the slow Skurun, it is pointless. It doesn't do any damage. So yeah, use the slow Skurun. You can put it from a height, like long range, and control the movement of their characters. And then the skills here. This is where it goes a bit different from PvE. So we've got volley for quick damage, and then various control skills. That's what it is. So we've got stun here. We've got the silence or stun, whatever when you want to use this as, and then this is slow and maybe root if you're using the static field Skurun. So all for controlling their movement, stunning them and stuff. Most of your damage is going to be coming from the basic attacks and Mark of Death when you put that on. And then first aid is here. I would say put it on this bar 1 because it's going to be very useful for tanking when you want to use this. So this is what I would recommend as a PvP build. Only I wouldn't recommend anything else for PvP. Most of the other skills, they just won't really do that much. Now, you might notice there's one that's missing from here, and that is Smokescreen. So, when I was looking at PvP builds and trying to work out what to include, it was very hard looking at these skills to sort of justify not having one in there. Pierce is probably the only one which I could justify not having in there, because most of the time you're attacking one target, so the only benefit it's giving you is the Skuruns that give a bit more damage when you're attacking. But it is good to have in there. So anyway, what I would do to include Smokescreen is each time you die, use barbed arrows and then swap it out to Smokescreen, and then you have it on that bar 2. It would be nice to have it on bar 1. The other way around. You have it on that bar 1. It'd be nice to have it on bar 2, but unfortunately there are 6 skills which you want to have in bar 2, and it makes sense to have barbed arrows there and then you swap it out. So you can see here I'm saying you're going to have to swap it out each time you revive, so it's a little bit irritating, but I would say if you want to play optimally, that is the way to do it, and there are a lot of great skills in here which you don't really want to remove. So I think that's it for this video. I've gone through absolutely everything that I wanted to go through. I hope it's clear enough with every message I was trying to get across, and by watching this video you have a much better understanding of how the class works, how you want to use it, how you can achieve damage, how you can achieve a defense, where you want to put skill points, all the different ideas about builds and stuff. And yeah, hopefully it's explained everything, except for Skuruns, which is going to be the next video. So, sorry again for the massive delay to this video. I have finally got it out, and I hope you have enjoyed it. The next video will be the final video for the Archer series. It will be going through all the Skuruns and talking about which ones are good to get up, which ones are useful, which ones to ignore, and all that kind of stuff. Be just like the wizard one which I made a while ago. So, thanks for watching. I will see you next time, and have a good one.